The microphone didn't just pick up her vows. It picked up the truth. The expensive ribbon, wrapped kind that slices deeper than any lie. I was standing there in my too tight bridesmaid dress. The ugly lavender one she swore was so me. Holding her bouquet like the good little prop I was supposed to be. The champagne toast had just ended. The air still sparkling with false sentiment. Then my sister Ilara, the radiant bride, her face a mask of flawless happiness, took the mic for her thank yous. She thanked our parents for their unwavering support, her new husband for seeing her soul, her friends for their loyalty. Her eyes, the same cold blue as mine, scanned the crowd of 200, all their country club friends, all our family, all the people who mattered, and then landed on me. A smile, thin and sharp as a razor blade, touched her perfect lips. "And I have to thank my little sister Anya," she said, her voice dripping with saccharine warmth. The room cooed. For always being such a reminder, a slight theatrical pause. The DJ had even faded the background music. A reminder that even when you feel utterly, completely unwanted, you can still show up and, well, take up space. The laugh that followed wasn't a titter. It was a full, throaty sound of pure delight. My parents, standing beside her, didn't gasp. They didn't scold. My mother's hand flew to her mouth, but her shoulders were shaking. My father's head was bowed, his entire body quaking with silent, mirthful agreement. They were laughing. The sound was swallowed by the sudden, deafening roar of blood in my ears. But I saw it, the convulsion of their bodies. The shared glance of relief that the unwanted one was finally being put in her public, permanent place. The $3.5 million inheritance from our grandmother, the one left solely to me. The one that had, mysteriously, been reinvested into Elera's burgeoning real estate empire just 6 months ago, after a series of pressured, tearful family meetings. It all crystallized in that moment. The trust fund wasn't mismanaged, it was stolen. The love wasn't conditional, it was a fiction. I was not family. I was a line item, a problem they had elegantly solved. I stood there, the heat of 200 pitying and amused stares branding my skin. My face frozen in what I hoped was a vague smile, my fingers numb around the stems of her lilies. And that was the moment I knew. The real revenge begins now. The following weeks were a study in silent disintegration. I moved through my life in Manhattan, a life that suddenly seemed like a cheap set, as a ghost. My one-bedroom apartment in Kips Bay, once a sanctuary, now felt like a rented box filled with the echoes of their laughter. I quit my job as a paralegal, a position Elera had always called adorably earnest, using the last of my personal savings to buy time. The days bled into nights as I began the excavation. I started with the cold, hard numbers, the paper trail my family assumed I was too sentimental or too stupid to follow. Grandmother's will was explicit, a PDF on a lawyer's server I accessed through a forgotten, shared email password. To my granddaughter Annie Elise Voss, I leave the entirety of my liquid assets, held in the trust, to be dispersed at her discretion upon her 30th birthday, for she has the compassionate heart this world needs. I had turned 30 last year. The meetings began soon after. My parents, with Ilara as their poised spokeswoman, explaining the volatility of the market, the generational opportunity in a development project she was leading in Tribeca. "We're pooling resources, Anya," Ilara had said, her hand on mine across our parents' dining table. "It's what family does. Your money will work harder with mine. I'll oversee everything. You just sign here." And I had, because the idea of family was the only currency I had ever truly valued. Now, I traced the digital footsteps. The trust was emptied the next day. The funds didn't go to a development fund, they flowed into Elysian Holdings, Ilara's corporate vehicle, and were immediately leveraged as collateral for a loan that bought a derelict warehouse in Red Hook, a warehouse she'd just sold for a profit of over $7 million. My inheritance had doubled. It just wasn't mine anymore. I didn't confront them. Confrontation was for people who sought apology, for those who believed in justice. I was no longer that person. The hurt had been cauterized in the ballroom of the Pierre Hotel, leaving behind a cold, focused ash. I began to shadow her life, not as a stalker, but as a scholar of her destruction. I learned her routines: the 7:15 a.m. spin class in the West Village, the 100-odored a.m. meetings at her sleek, glass-walled office on Fifth Avenue overlooking the park, the long, liquid lunches at members-only clubs where deals were sealed with a handshake and a glass of Burgundy. Her world was one of curated influence, a network of bankers, politicians, and socialites who mistook ruthlessness for ambition. I took a job as a low-level server at one of those clubs, the Aviary. My hair dyed dark, glasses obscuring my eyes. I listened. I learned that her empire, for all its glitter, was built on a foundation of favors and discreet threats. Her husband, Charles, was a blandly handsome hedge fund manager whose compliance was purchased with her success. Their marriage, I overheard her telecompanion at table 3, was a merger of social capital. I recorded that on my phone, tucked into my apron. It was the first of many. The real weapon, however, came from the past. I remembered, with sudden, shocking clarity, the small, silver digital recorder our grandmother had given me when I'd expressed an interest in journalism as a teenager. "For capturing the truth, my dear," she'd said. It was still in an old jewelry box. I charged it. Its memory was full of snippets of my childhood, my own voice, my grandmother's soft stories. And one file, dated over a decade ago, from a Thanksgiving. The sound quality was poor, filled with clinking plates and football in the background. But the voices were unmistakable. My father, wary. "Alara's the one who can carry the name. Anya is sweet. But she's a follower." My mother. It's a mother's curse to see it so clearly. "We have one arrow in our quiver, Richard. We aim it." And Alara, younger, her voice already a blade. "Don't worry. I'll take care of her. She'll always have a place. Just not at the table." I sat on the floor of my apartment, the city's neon glow bleeding through the blinds, and listened to it on a loop. This wasn't evidence of a crime. It was evidence of a conspiracy of the soul. It was the blueprint of my erasure. Alone, it was a sad relic. But paired with what I was about to gather, it would be the detonator. The plan required patience, a quality my old self had in abundance, but my new self had to cultivate like a poison garden. I needed a modern confession. I engineered a meeting. Not as a server but as myself. I invited Elara for a drink, framing it as my attempt to move past the wedding awkwardness. I chose a loud, trendy bar in the meatpacking district, all pounding bass and blinding light, a place where people leaned in close to hear. I wore a jacket with a modified inner pocket, the small recorder sewn into the lining, its microphone a tiny, undetectable prick of metal near the lapel. I was nervous, the old Anya screaming to run, to beg for love instead of plotting its destruction. But when she walked in, a vision in a cream-colored sheath coat, her eyes already scanning the room for more important people, the coldness settled back in. We made stilted conversation. I apologized for being sensitive. I played the fool, the wounded little sister. I steered the talk, with clumsy hints, toward money, toward gratitude, and she took the bait.
"Anya,"
she said, leaning forward, her perfume expensive and icy, washing over me. A condescending smile. "You have to understand. That money was wasted on you. Grandma was sentimental, but she was also foolish. You would have donated it to a shelter for three-legged dogs or something equally pathetic. I used it. I built something. And in a way, that's the greatest respect I could pay to her legacy. You should be thanking me. I saved you from your own weakness." I let a tear fall, a real one, born of a genuine, scalding hatred. I sniffled, asking how Mom and Dad could agree. She laughed, the same laugh from the wedding. "They've always known what you are." Unwanted was perhaps a harsh word for a public forum, but darling, it's not an inaccurate one. We've given you a role, a part to play. Be grateful for the script. I had it, every damning, dismissive, arrogant word. The digital file in my grandmother's recorder, and the crystal clear, contemporary confession in my jacket. A perfect, terrible pair. Now came the art. Revenge, I was learning, was not an act but an atmosphere. It was about shifting the ground beneath someone's feet, so slowly they didn't feel the earthquake, until the walls were already down. I began anonymously. A tip to a bored, gossip, hungry reporter at a tabloid about irregularities in the permits for Ellora's Red Hook project, suggesting payoffs to a city inspector. A packet of documents, highlighting the suspiciously rapid transfer of funds from my trust, sent to the more serious journalists at the Wall Street Journal and Bloomberg. I used public computers at libraries, paid for burner phones with cash. Became a whisper in the system. The first crack appeared in the business section. Elysian Holdings faces questions over source of initial capital. It was a small piece, but it caused ripples. I watched from a cafe across the street as Elara stormed into her office building that morning. Her usual composure cracked. Charles called me that night, his voice tight. Your sister is under a bit of stress, Anya. Perhaps you could be supportive. I replied with gentle concern, the perfect, unwitting sister. The psychological warfare was more intimate. I had a key to our parents' house in Rye, a relic from when I would house-sit. One rainy Tuesday, when I knew they were at a charity luncheon, I let myself in. I didn't steal. I rearranged. I took the family portrait from the mantel. The one from 5 years ago, where I was cropped awkwardly at the edge, and replaced it with an enlarged, framed print of the last photo of me with my grandmother. Her arm tight around me, both of us laughing. I left my grandmother's favorite scarf, the one I'd kept, draped over my mother's reading chair. I left the silver recorder, with just the old Thanksgiving audio file on it, playing on a loop, hidden deep in the shelf of the den stereo system, set to turn on at random intervals. My mother called a week later, her voice frail. The house, it feels strange, Anya. I keep hearing things. Memories are like that, Mom, I said softly. They have a way of surfacing. The pressure on Elara's professional life tightened. The city opened an official inquiry into the permits. One of her key investors, a skittish pension fund, got cold feet and pulled out of her next big project, a luxury condo tower in Long Island City. The whisper campaign had worked. The scent of trouble, however faint, was enough for the wolves to circle. She became brittle, her elegance hardening into a sharp, dangerous edge. She summoned me to her penthouse, a cold glass area in the sky with views that seemed to swallow the city whole. This time, I was ready. I wore a necklace, a gift from Charles years ago, which I'd had modified. The pendant was a listening device, streaming audio directly to a cloud server. She stood at the floor-to-ceiling window, a silhouette against the sprawl of midnight New York. She didn't offer me a drink. Someone is sabotaging me, she stated, her voice flat. It has a pathetic, personal feel to it. I feigned ignorance, worry. She turned, her eyes scanning me as if I were a line on a balance sheet. Was it you? The question was casual, almost bored. Elara, I don't even understand what's happening, I murmured, wringing my hands, the picture of helpless concern. She stared at me for a long minute, then smiled, a terrifying, empty stretch of lips. No, you don't have the spine. You never did. But you're a symbol. The weak link. And when I find out who's doing this, I will use every resource I have to break them. I will burn their life to the ground, and salt the earth where it stood. She was talking to the room, to the city, to the specter of opposition. But she was also, unknowingly, giving me another recording. A confession of intent, of monstrous capability. It was perfect. The final move required an audience. Elara, fighting to save her empire, arranged a family and close associates, meeting at her office boardroom. It was a display of strength, a performance of unity to calm her remaining backers. Our parents were there, looking old and confused. Charles was there, pale and silent. A few key investors sat around the polished mahogany table. I arrived last, dressed in a simple, severe black suit, my hair pulled back. I carried a slim, elegant briefcase. Elara was in the midst of a PowerPoint presentation, her voice ringing with forced confidence, explaining the minor regulatory hurdles and competitive smear campaigns. She paused as I entered. Anya, so glad you could join us to show your support. The condescension was a living thing in the room. I didn't sit. I walked to the head of the table. beside the large wall-mounted screen. I have a short presentation of my own, I said, my voice clear and steady, a voice none of them had ever heard. I plugged a flash drive into the laptop controlling the screen. Elara's face went from confusion to dawning icy horror. What is this? My father barked. Anya? This is not the time. I clicked play. The first audio, the old, slightly grainy one from Thanksgiving, filled the silent, air-conditioned room. Anya is sweet. But she's a follower. We have one arrow in our quiver, Richard. We aim it. She'll always have a place. Just not at the table. My mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth just as it had at the wedding, but this time in genuine horror. My father's face crumpled into a mask of shame. The investors shifted, uncomfortable. Before anyone could speak, I clicked the next file. Elara's voice. Crisp and cold from the bar. That money was wasted on you. You should be thanking me. I saved you from your own weakness. They've always known what you are. Unwanted was perhaps a harsh word for a public forum, but darling, it's not an inaccurate one. I followed it with the final clip, from her penthouse, her vow of destruction. I will burn their life to the ground and salt the earth where it stood. The room was a tomb. Elara was white, a statue of perfect, frozen rage. Charles had his head in his hands. One of the investors, a man with a grim face, stood up. This meeting is over. It's not, I said quietly. I advanced the slide. It showed the wire transfer documents, the trust dispersal, the flow into Elysian Holdings, the loan documents, the sale of the Red Hook property. A simple, irrefutable flowchart of theft. This is grand larceny. This is fraud. This is a recording of the motivation and the confession. I looked at my parents, their world dissolving. You were accomplices. In spirit and in silence. Finally I looked at Elara. The terrifying, elegant monster was gone. In her place was a cornered animal. Her eyes wide with the realization that her weapons, her influence, her money, her family narrative, were useless. The recording had neutralized them all. It wasn't just evidence for the police. It was a social and psychological atom bomb. I've filed a civil suit to recover every cent, with interest. I said, my voice the only sound in the ringing silence. The district attorney has copies of everything you just heard. So do the SEC and the IRS. I pulled a single sheet of paper from my briefcase and slid it down the table toward her. It was a screenshot of the front page of tomorrow's New York Post, already leaked. The headline screamed, IRS Hail. CCI Empla BLN Stoli N Sisters INRITNC. Below it was a photo from the wedding of Elara laughing, and a smaller inset of me. Looking devastated. You wanted me to know my place, I said, gathering my things. Now you know yours. I left them there, in that glass room suspended over the city. The revenge was complete. It wasn't violent, but it was total. It took her money, her reputation, her power. And the family myth that sustained it all. The police investigation that followed was swift. Elara was charged. Charles filed for divorce. My parents, pariahs by association, sold the house in Rye and moved to a quiet, anonymous condo in Florida, their laughter forever silenced. I took back what was mine. And more in the settlement. But the victory was quiet, hollow. I sat in my new apartment, one with a view I chose for myself, and watched the rain streak the windows, reflecting the neon of the city below. The unwanted thing was gone, exorcised. What was left was just me, alone with the silence, and the faint, echoing satisfaction that the record, at last, had been set straight.